You know that feeling when you check your bank account and your stomach drops, even though you're financially stable? Or that rush of anxiety when someone asks to borrow $20 and suddenly you're calculating all the ways your life might fall apart if you say yes? Here's the thing, we like to think we're rational about money. We tell ourselves it's just numbers on a screen, just pieces of paper, just a tool we use to get what we need. But if that's true, why does losing $50 feel so much worse than finding $50 feels good? Why do we hold on to gift cards we'll never use, keep receipts for purchases we can't return, and feel genuine emotional pain when we see a price drop right after we bought something? The truth is, money isn't just money to your brain. It's wrapped up in identity, security, self-worth, and a whole tangle of psychological wiring that goes way deeper than any spreadsheet can capture. And understanding this emotional attachment isn't about judging yourself or fixing some flaw. It's about recognizing that your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do, just in a world it wasn't designed for. Let's start with something psychologists call loss aversion. Back in the 1970s, researchers Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky discovered something fascinating. People feel losses about twice as intensely as they feel equivalent gains. Losing $100 hurts roughly twice as much as finding $100 feels good. Think about that for a second. Your brain isn't treating money as a neutral resource that goes up and down. It's treating every loss like a threat, like something precious is being taken from you. And in a way, it makes perfect sense. For most of human history, losing resources could literally mean death. Your ancestors who freaked out about losing food or shelter were the ones who survived long enough to pass on their genes. So now, here you are, having a mild panic attack because you accidentally tipped 18% instead of 15. But it goes even deeper than loss aversion. Money becomes what psychologists call a symbolic resource. It stops being just a medium of exchange and starts representing everything you value: freedom, security, status, success, even love. There's this beautiful experiment where researchers gave people either warm or cold drinks to hold, then asked them to evaluate products. The people holding warm drinks were willing to pay more. Why? Because warmth, comfort, and security get psychologically linked in your brain, and money becomes the bridge between them. When you save money, you're not just saving numbers, you're saving possibilities, saving safety, saving proof that you're okay. And this is where it gets really interesting, because your emotional attachment to money isn't the same as someone else's. Some people grew up watching their parents fight about bills, and money became coded as danger and conflict in their brains. Others grew up wealthy but emotionally neglected and learned that money is the only reliable source of security when people let you down. Maybe you grew up poor, and every dollar you save now feels like protection against ever going back to that helplessness. Or maybe you grew up comfortable, but you internalize the message that your worth is measured by what you achieve, what you earn, what you accumulate. These aren't conscious choices you made. They're psychological imprints, patterns your brain carved out as it tried to make sense of the world around you. There's a concept in behavioral economics called mental accounting, and it reveals just how emotional our relationship with money really is. We don't treat all money the same way, even though logically a dollar is a dollar. Money you earned feels more valuable than money you won. Money in your savings account feels sacred, while money in your checking account is just cash flow. You might agonize over spending $15 on lunch, but barely notice a $15 subscription you forgot to cancel. Why? Because each category of money carries different emotional weight. The lunch feels like a choice, something you're responsible for, while the subscription just fades into background noise. Your brain is constantly creating these invisible psychological accounts, assigning different levels of importance and pain to identical amounts of money. And let's talk about what happens when money becomes part of your identity. There's this phenomenon researchers call financial identity threat. When your sense of self is tied up in being financially successful or being frugal or being generous, any challenge to that identity feels like a challenge to who you are as a person. If you pride yourself on being financially disciplined and then you impulse buy something expensive, the guilt you feel isn't really about the money. It's about the story you tell yourself about who you are. You're not just someone who spent money unwisely, you're someone who failed to be the person you believe you should be. And that hits so much harder than any financial consequence ever could. Here's where it gets both painful and profound. Your emotional attachment to money is often inverse to how much control you feel in your life. When everything else feels uncertain, money becomes the one thing you can control, measure, and protect. During times of stress, anxiety, or trauma, people often develop more rigid or obsessive relationships with money, not because they're materialistic, but because money represents the illusion of control in a chaotic world. It's why financial anxiety often has less to do with how much money you actually have and more to do with how much uncertainty you're carrying in other areas of your life. But emotional attachment to money isn't inherently bad. In fact, it can be incredibly protective. The person who feels genuine fear about debt might avoid the financial traps that destroy others. The person who associates money with freedom might build a life that actually gives them independence. The person who grew up struggling and now obsessively saves might be securing a future their past self could only dream of. The attachment becomes problematic not when it exists, but when it starts controlling you, when it stops serving your actual values and starts feeding anxiety, shame, or avoidance. Research in financial psychology shows that people with the healthiest relationships with money aren't the ones who feel nothing about it. They're the ones who have examined their emotional patterns, understand where their triggers come from, and can hold both security and flexibility in their minds at the same time. They can feel the fear of loss without letting it paralyze them. They can enjoy abundance without attaching their self-worth to it. They recognize money as important without making it ultimate. So maybe the question isn't whether you're emotionally attached to money. Of course you are. You're human, and your brain is doing exactly what evolution designed it to do: protect you, predict danger, and assign meaning to the resources that keep you alive. The real question is whether that attachment is working for you or against you. Are your financial decisions driven by values you actually hold or by fears you haven't examined? Are you using money to build the life you want, or are you serving money itself, trying to fill holes it was never meant to fill? Because here's the thing. Understanding your emotional relationship with money doesn't make you weak or irrational. It makes you aware, and awareness is where change becomes possible. When you know why you feel that spike of anxiety, that rush of shame, that desperate need to hold on or let go, you're no longer just reacting, you're choosing. And in that space between the feeling and the choice, that's where freedom lives. So next time you feel that emotion rise up around money, whether it's fear or guilt or pride or relief, pause for just a second. Ask yourself, what's this really about? What's my brain trying to protect me from? What old story is playing out right here in this moment? You might be surprised by what you find. And you might realize that the most valuable thing you can invest in isn't financial at all. It's understanding yourself a little bit better than you did yesterday.